to this next podcast from Jackie Jones, Living Life Being Human. And I just wanted to ask you a question, really. What is it that's stopping you from getting what you want out of life? Is it a fear of the word no? I've been doing quite a bit in the membership about this over the past week. I've been looking at Michael Neals' Supercoach, which has got 10 secrets to transforming your life, and I would highly recommend you go and look at that. But it's a lot of what's in that has really resonated with me, plus other books that I've been listening to while I've been out walking. I'm currently trying to do 100 miles in 100 days, which is literally a mile a day. Finding the time to do that is maybe something for another podcast. But it's really interesting when I talk to people about asking for something and what that can bring up for us as individuals. For me, and if you listen back to any of my previous podcasts, which I would strongly recommend that you do, I talk quite a bit about my background and how I'm a people pleaser. I have a massive be strong driver. So for me to ask somebody for something is quite difficult. The reality is it's not. I just make it really difficult. So there's something for me about what it means if I need to ask somebody for help or advice or anything in particular, and dependent on not only where I am in that moment, as in where my state of mind is, if I'm tired, if I'm stressed, if I'm overworked, that can impact on it. But it's also the situation that I'm asking the question in. So if I put that into some sort of reality, if I wanted a cup of coffee, I do like a cup of coffee. So if I wanted a cup of coffee and I said to my son, go put the kettle on for me, there's no thought in that whatsoever. I've asked a question. I've asked him to go and put the kettle on so I can have a cuppa, and it is what it is. If I was going to the bank manager to ask him for money for a loan, I would have a whole load of thinking around that. One, our life position comes into it. In transactional analysis, which is what I'm trained in, there's something called life positions, which is I'm okay, you're okay. I'm okay, you're not okay. I'm not okay, you are okay, and I'm not okay, you're not okay. So we kind of move around these different positions, which once you get your head around them, they're quite easy. But status comes into that for me. So if I was going into a room with a bank manager who potentially he is holding all the cards, I'm going to go in a one down position. So the way that I would walk into that room would be, you're okay, I'm not, because you hold all the cards. And in that one thought, the way that I ask for something, the way that I hold myself, my thoughts, my feelings, and everything in that room are completely different to when I just ask my son, put the kettle on for me. So there's something about if I'm invested in the answer as well, that can have a big bearing on it. So why is it that some people can just ask and ask and ask for anything from anybody and they're fine with it? And for other people, you know, it's a big thing. So, it's just about being curious about what that is. And, sometimes if we're invested in what the answer is, that can dictate how we feel about the whole thing, asking that question. And if we look at status again, that if I go into something with an, one down position, the way that I ask the question can be quite pleading, please could you help build my self-esteem and my confidence, and please affirm that I am an okay person and I deserve to be in the world, and all those. And as I'm saying that, I can feel myself going lower and lower. But sometimes that's how I feel I am when I'm asking a question. If it's I'm okay, you're okay, and we're both on an even keel, if I'm asking a mate, do you want to go out tonight for a drink? There's not a lot of thought process goes into it. I don't feel that they're any better than me or that I'm any lower than them. It's just quite even. But the reality is, a question is a question, and to ask somebody for something is exactly the same content until I bring it to life and I make stories up about that person or me. And if the answer to the question that I ask is no, what does that mean for me? Am I going to be devastated by getting a no from that person? And what does that mean? Does that mean that they don't like me? Does that mean that I failed? Does that mean that I've not done a good enough job? Does that mean that I phrased it wrong? There's a heap load of thinking that can go on around that. And sometimes, if we think about it, the answers potentially are yes, no, don't know. Those are the answers to whatever question we put to somebody. So a yes is brilliant, fantastic, I've got that. A no, although it might not be the response that we want, it kind of takes us off the hook a little bit. That if it's a definite no, then I don't need to get caught up in all that. What can I do to change their mind? Have I not done it? What's the process from this? I need to try and convince them or up the ante or do something different. If it's a no, it's a no. And if it's a don't know, then it's just that it's a not now. It doesn't mean that it's a definite no and it's not a yes. It's just a not at the moment. So again, it's the way I kind of take in that information and what I do with it. But one of the big barriers, I find for most people in asking questions and getting what we want out of life is a fear of being rejected, a fear of somebody discounting us, a fear of feeling inferior to the other person. There's lots of fear around when we want something from somebody else. So maybe if we went about it in a different way, there's a few tips that I would like to pass on around this. So one thing that I would kind of recommend to you is make sure that the person you ask is capable of giving you what you want. Because if we're asking the wrong person for something, then we're not going to get the answer that we want. So I don't know. Why do I always think about money when I'm thinking about questions? Maybe there's something in that. If I wanted a lift into town with somebody, I wouldn't ask somebody that couldn't drive. That stands to reason. And it's a similar thing. If I want somebody to help me sort out a website, it's important that I ask the right person, that they've got the right skills, that they've got the time, that they've got the ability, and all those sort of things. So it's not just about asking anybody anything. Sometimes it's about, making sure that we're asking the right person and that that person can do what I'm asking them to do. The other thing is, sometimes it helps if we ask the person expecting them to say yes, because it takes some of the pressure off us. If we go into it and we're expecting a no, like I said, we can be quite apologetic. We can be, going in a little bit lower than the other person because we're expecting them to discount us and to say no. So if we go in expecting a yes, if we've already imagined that we're going to get what we want from that person and walk out of that room on a high, we stand more chance of giving that energy to that person. The other thing is be creative about how you're asking for things. Is it manipulative for us to use what we can to our advantage in a situation? I'm not talking about manipulating the person. I'm not talking about, scamming them or taking money off them or anything like that, because that's not good, and I wouldn't recommend anybody do that. But be creative with it. Use your sense of humor. Use, all the tricks that you've got in the book. Bribery with kids. I'm talking about my son now. If I want him to empty the dishwasher, then I will manipulate the situation and say, you can watch your program tonight or do X, Y, and Z if you do this for me. So I'm more likely to get the result that I want to. So it's just about exploring this. One, how do you go into that situation asking for what you want? Are you going into it in the right frame of mind? Are you going into it expecting a no? Are you going into it expecting a yes? And what story have you made up around that? If it is a no, how do you take that? Does that kind of cut through like a knife and it's absolutely devastating for you? Or are you okay with that, that you don't take it personally? Because it's more to do with the other person and how they receive it than whether it's personal to me. Doesn't mean that they don't like me if they say no. Maybe it's just that they haven't got the time to do it. It doesn't mean that I'm not good enough or worthy enough if somebody says no. It might mean that actually they're worn out. They haven't got the time or the energy to do that at the moment. And that has no bearing on me whatsoever. It's not personal. It's nothing to do with me. It might be that that person feels that they haven't got the right skills, even though I see them, this persona, I see them as being perfectly capable. They might be insecure. They might not feel that they're good enough to do whatever it is that I'm asking them to do. So there's a heap load of stuff that goes on in that room, and it's not all about me. If I get out of my own way and look at it, from a here and now, I'm okay, you're okay position, asking people for something, asking people for help and advice is not such a big deal, and we don't need to make it into a big deal. So I hope that's kind of given you something to muse over, and feel free to ask me any questions. Feel free to comment underneath this if you're watching it on YouTube, or you can contact me if you're listening to this on a podcast, Jackie at jackiejones.co.uk, and I shall speak to you all soon in the next episode. Take care.